The COVID-19 has shaken every economic model and Australia's own view of globalisation and privatisation. Joining me now live is international economist Tim Harcourt from the University of New South Wales and host of The Airport Economist. Tim, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me.
Good to be with you, Danica.
We often talk about the benefits of globalisation and international trade, but not necessarily about the shock impact. How is this crisis changing our thinking?
Well, we of course get the benefits of globalisation, particularly here in Australia as a small open economy, but now we've seen the downside with all the international travel and international trade being able to transmit this virus from Wuhan, Western China, to Iran, Italy and the rest of the world. So I think this is going to probably see not an outright rejection of globalisation, but probably a reset in our thinking and the types of things that we do. And I guess there'll be some trade distance from China in the same way we're seeing social distance from one another.
And how does it compare to, say, the SARS outbreak or what we saw following September 11 or even the global financial crisis?
Well, I guess with SARS, it was Southeast Asia and they were able to contain it to a certain region. The global financial crisis is really a North Atlantic financial crisis with the US and the UK and Europe. In this case, you're seeing all the major economies being affected at the same time. China, Europe, South Korea, now the United States, in the manufacturing global supply chains as well. And you just saw from your report there how it's going to affect countries like South Africa and Indonesia, the Philippines, that don't have the same social infrastructure that other countries have in health and social welfare. So it's quite worrying because it's hit all regions of the world, all industries at the same time, which makes it difficult, makes the reasons for international cooperation in dealing with coronavirus even more important.
It is worrying, and given the unprecedented nature of the situation, can fiscal stimulus save us?
Well, it's going to help, and the central banks are doing the right thing. We saw the Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, doing the right thing here. I think the more important is the announcement we just heard today in your program for the wage subsidy. This has been tried in Britain, in Denmark, where you basically allow people to remain in their jobs, to be paid, albeit with a subsidy. That way you keep income in the economy, you keep a safety net, and you keep people in work, even if they're at home social isolating. And also when the economy recovers, when we find a vaccine and we want to crank things up quickly, people won't be rehired. You won't have the same labour market churn where you have to find rehires. You're going to have the same workforce. You're going to have the same connection with the employer, and so it will actually help recovery as well. So I think the wage subsidy is really crucial in the labour market, and in some ways trying to stimulate the economy with spending when everyone's at home and global supply chains have incredible logjams, perhaps is not quite as effective as it was during the global financial crisis. Perhaps the wage subsidy, cementing the social safety net, keeping the connection between employer and employee, is better for workers and businesses. And then when we do provide a fiscal stimulus in the recovery route after the vaccine has been found, that might actually be more effective. So those developments today on the wage subsidy is actually good news in fighting the economic effects of coronavirus as well as the virus itself.
You mentioned the Reserve Bank, and this week it injected almost $7 billion into the financial system. Does that go far enough? Has it done the right thing?
Well, they've had to do it, and because interest rates are so low, cutting interest rates, they say, monetary policy like that's pushing on a string. So they had to do something else with quantitative easing. But I actually think the wage subsidy is more important. The government's tried to do what it can fiscally. The Reserve Bank's tried to do what it can in terms of monetary policy. But if we have a wage subsidy, we keep people in employment, then we won't have those mass redundancies that have been having a great psychological impact on consumers and businesses. It'll actually be able to stabilise consumption and to some degree investment, and allow the public health policy to take place. And once the public health policies been in place and we can reduce the numbers, test well, find the vaccine, then that'll allow the economy to move on the upswing, and you'll be able to perhaps have another bout of fiscal stimulus that will be much more effective than it would be now when times are very uncertain.
Tim, you've previously called for the government to take equity in companies like Qantas. It raises a broader question. Do you think that nationalisation is perhaps back on the agenda?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a bit more Ben Chifley, a little bit less Paul Keating now. We've seen governments take stakes in airlines all over the world. It's going to happen in the UK, in Europe, and also in Asia. So I think that's probably inevitable. And given that the tyranny of distance, not just the tyranny of social distance, but the tyranny of distance, Australia being a long way from the rest of the world and large distances within, I think you're going to see more government intervention. Airlines, and rather than cash flashes, it's probably more efficient to take some equity. And I mean, Qantas operated for 75 years as a government-owned airline. It did pretty well, built a great brand. So I don't think that anyone should have anything to fear from that, and it'll basically keep people in jobs when we start flying again, including me.
Absolutely, all of us. Tim Harcourt, appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much for joining me.